Hello. See, one thing that's interesting is that Neville used obviously a ton of religious imagery, evocative, symbolic, poetic, mystical, spiritual, primarily Christian, but Western culture, Judaic tradition, Christian Judaic tradition imagery to get his point across about the imagination. And make the argument that the imagination was just in control of everything. And he, obviously you read Neville and there's this really like this sense of God and, the prophets and Christ and all these things. And again, Israel Regardie has that great essay, which we did a video about, just talking about how whether Neville did this intentionally or unintentionally, it was a very effective way to get people to believe that their imagination was controlling things. And what's interesting about Coué is that he basically does none of this. He just says it kind of like it is, and doesn't throw religious words into the mix, really. And to give you an example, these are just a couple lines. It is the imagination and not the will which is the dominating faculty of man. It is a serious mistake to advise people to train their wills. They should learn to control and direct their imagination. Pretty straightforward, right? And then, this is, it related to what we've been discussing in the last couple of videos. This quote here from Coué's Thoughts and Precepts. Coué says, a person wants to do such and such a thing, but imagining that he is not able to accomplish it, he does exactly the contrary to that which he wants to do. Dizziness is a striking example of this. Suppose a person is walking in a very narrow path, bordering a steep precipice. At first he thinks nothing of it, but suddenly the idea comes to him that he may tumble over the edge. If he has the misfortune to look down, he's lost. The image of a fall has taken root in his mind. He feels himself attracted toward the abyss by an invisible force which becomes more and more insistent the greater his efforts at resistance. Finally, he gives way and down he goes. This is the cause of most accidents in the Alps. Physically, you respond to the mental picture produced by your imagination. Unwholesome thoughts are like an abyss that attracts those unable to resist. That's the imagination. And again, you don't have to necessarily agree with all this. I would say, in the very least, that if you're into the law of attraction, you are acknowledging that the imagination, your imaginative faculties, play a much, much bigger role than our culture generally acknowledges. Much bigger role. And I know both Neville and Coué would say an exponentially bigger role. And that your willpower, trying to use hard effort to get things done, is actually not effective unless your imagination is aligned with that and says, yeah, we're going to do this. But usually when we want to do something and we want it badly, our imagination says, no, we're not going to do this. We don't believe this is going to happen. And then it comes up with all these, reasons, quote unquote, as to why it's not going to happen. But that's imaginative doubt. Again, Coué says, physically, you respond to the mental picture produced by your imagination. And this happens automatically. You have no choice in this. If I say elephant, you think of an elephant. Physically, you respond. It's just, if you use a phrase, you use language, there's going to be mental pictures produced by that language. So yeah, I hope that these, recent videos on Coué have been helpful. I'm going to probably do more. I'd like to go, when I have the time, I'm going to just try to go over some of the kind of experiments or what he would show people when they went to his clinic, what he would guide them through to kind of indicate to them that it's their imagination and their thinking, what they're thinking, that is in control much more than their willpower, and that their effort is not going to work well for them unless they align it better with their imagination. So if I have time in the next week or so, I'll try to do a video or a series of videos just where we go over some of those experiments. And what's interesting is you're going to notice that so much of this is just basically like hypnosis. Coué says this is self-hypnosis. The difference with Coué is that he's not ascribing any outside force. There's nothing magical here. He's saying this is hypnosis that you're doing to yourself. Physically, you respond to the mental images, the mental pictures produced by your imagination. You're doing it to yourself. You're responding to what you're thinking, what you're imagining. Very deep, very profound, and a practical way to look at these law of attraction principles and then actually start to implement them in our lives, hopefully with more and more effectiveness.